My name's Murph, and I'm an alcoholic. Nice to be here. Nice to be sober. Little early for me to be up without golf clubs in my hands. So we'll see if we can get through this. Welcome to our new people, Emma, John G., Rachel, and Kimberly, I believe. That was the four. I really hope you find here what I found here, and that is a happy, joyous, and free life, a life that's filled with a lot of love, a life that's filled with friends and family, and a life I wouldn't trade with any single person that's at this meeting. When I say I'm an alcoholic with alcoholism. And alcoholism is a mind-powered disease. It's a disease of bad thinking and wrong perceptions. And that's where our disease lies. I'm sure when I started talking, everybody who was looking at me had a different perception of what Murph was going to be like, what Murph's share was going to be like, what Murph looks like. Is Murph single? Not kidding on the last one. What's he all about? And the thing about it is each one of your perceptions of me would be wrong because you don't know me. And so we have wrong perceptions. We judge other people. And I lived in a place where my life was pretty tough. Each and every one of us at this meeting has gone through some type of an emotional trauma, something in our lives that caused us to want to shut this down, to shut this mind off. And it's different for each individual, and how each individual handles that is different. So you may have the same trauma as somebody else in the room. You may have lost somebody. You may have lost your job. You may have lost a child, whatever it was that got you to want to shut this off. But each individual has a different way of handling it. And so we can never judge somebody's trauma, what somebody's been through, what brought somebody here, because we have so many different people. We have groups of people that came from the hills, as we call them up here, that lived in huge homes. And then we have people that came in through the gutter. And the one thing that these people have in common is the way they felt when they walked into these rooms. And so I'll get to mine. My story kind of goes what it was like, what happened, what it was like, what happened, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. It wasn't this smooth ride. My trauma would happen when I was about 10 years old, and it was the beginning, and it would spark my alcoholism. At that age, and it was a knock at the door, and I was on my mother's coattail. I was around 10 or 11 years old, and my mom opened the door, and my brother was standing there, and my brother had his 3-week-old baby in his arms, and he looked at my mother and he said, "I don't want this child. You either take her or I'm giving her away." Heroin addiction and alcoholism had brought my brother to a place where he didn't even want his own child. And he was to hand my mom my niece, and my brother left, and I wasn't to see him again. He was bigger than life to me. And the whole dynamic of the family changed for me. I went from being the baby of the family, getting all the attention, to the middle child, which got no attention. At the same time, my father got his dream, and he bought a bar on the waterfront in San Francisco, and he became absent in my life. There was no more going to baseball games, which we did on a semi-regular basis. I didn't see him in the mornings anymore. I didn't see him at night anymore. And so I lost the two major male figures in my life in a short span. And there's nothing more important in a child's life than their father's protection. And I didn't feel protected. I felt abandoned, and I felt unloved. And I was to take this throughout my life. It started this self-talking mind. And if you know what I'm talking about, it's that negative self-talking mind that tells me that I'm ugly, that I'm skinny, that I'm too white, that no one's ever going to love me, no one's ever going to like me. And it follows me, and this voice just follows me, and it talks to me with great authority. It talks to me in a way because it's coming from my own head. You know, we tend to look at people that are out on the streets and they're talking to themselves out loud, and all of a sudden, you know, we're sitting there going, that guy's crazy. And yet I walked around the same way. I just didn't verbalize it. And so athletics was the first thing that got me out of my head. Athletics was the first thing that shut this thing off, that quieted this mind and allowed me to be in the place that I was in that moment that I was in. My grandfather, I showed the picture to some of you, he played for the Yankees and the Cubs and the minor league team out here. My father played a year of professional football back east, the first pro league, the Brooklyn Dodgers of the old American Football League. And my father played for that, and yet I never had a ball thrown to me. I was a very gifted athlete. I was a pitcher, and I threw really hard, and I was being looked at by a lot of different people. But my mind, that self-talk that told me that I was ugly, I had these ears that stuck way, way out, and I was white as a ghost. I was skinny. I was very self-conscious about the way I looked, so I grew my hair long. And I get to varsity as a freshman. I was put on the varsity team as a freshman, and the coach said, you have to cut your hair above your ears. And I was like, I can't do that. If I did that, I would open the floodgates to bullying and to people calling me names and things like that. And so I didn't cut my hair, and I quit playing baseball. And so I would move on, and I picked up some bad characters along the way. You know, when you don't feel loved, you reach out and you search for love in different places. And I searched for love, and I found a group of people that weren't your very best people to be hanging around with. I did a first robbery in the 8th grade, robbing my next door neighbor's home. I would go on to do things like that. And I can remember vividly the day I took that first drink, or second or third. I don't know exactly which one it was, but my mind shut off. I wasn't thinking about all these things I felt about myself. And I became, in the moment, I became where I was I could handle things. I could be with friends. I could ask the girl to dance and all these other things. And it was because my mind was quieted. And so I felt better than and handsomer. And, I was living in the world of we call it, this, you're better, you're kinder, you're happier. And I had a good time, and so I would chase that, and I chased it for many, many years. I hated my father, and I hated my brother with every fiber in me. Everything that happened to me, after those first few drinks, I would blame on my father or my brother. Every part of my life, I was the victim, and I drank myself into a place where I was sitting there, and to the new people, there's a lot of single mothers here, and some single fathers, and they get to a place where their child is out there and starting to drink and starting to behave the way I behaved. And my mother told me, either you get help or you get out. Now I felt so abandoned my whole life, and now my mom was abandoning me in my eyes, my perceptions, my wrong perceptions. And I called her so many names, and I walked out of that house. And what I know today If she hadn't given me up, I would have never gotten her back. I would have continued to use her throughout my life as much as I possibly could to get what I needed. And so I took off. I was to live with a friend on his living room floor for the next year. I drank up all their liquor. They had this closet full of liquor that they had gotten from Christmas, all in these beautiful decanters and boxes. And I went in there and I drank every one of them. And I got that same ultimatum from them after going on a 3-day binge. And they said, you either get help or you get out. And I walked into my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting the next night. I went to meetings. It didn't take long, maybe a week, before I knew what I needed to do to straighten things out. And that's funny in itself. Under my power, I had ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And but yet I think I know what I need to do to fix my life. And I got the curse of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was, I got everything that I thought I needed. I got a new job, a union job. I started to make really good money. I got my own place. I got a brand new car. First time I'd ever had a car in my name. I never registered cars. I used to buy them like cheap $400 cars, and I would run them until the registration was up. Then I would leave them on the side of the road. In fact, this is so unbelievable. We used to empty the windshield wiper reservoir in the car, and we'd fill it up with vodka. And my buddy was a mechanic, and he found a way to run the line underneath the dashboard so that when we were driving, you hit the wash button for your washer and it would squirt vodka into our mouths. And we would be drinking in the car as we were driving. Brilliant. And so I got everything that I thought I needed, and hundreds of thousands of alcoholics waste their lives chasing after things they think that'll make them happy, satisfied, have contentment and joy. And we only end up frustrated and discontent. One of the characteristics of the alcoholic is an unsatisfiable mind. And when I'm untreated, I have this unsatisfiable mind, and I'll search for things. And I search for things like money, positions, higher levels of education, maybe to climb a mountain or to be number one in some sport. Often we want to own things like better, like boats, better homes, better clothes. And, often we're excited for a short time, but soon we end up empty. It's like chasing, it's chasing after things and never actually catching it, never catching that happiness. I only get it in spurts. And I know one thing today, that God can bring you joy without things, but things without God will never bring you joy. And I came to learn that, Alcoholics Anonymous can't be worked from the outside in. It has to be worked from the inside out. You want your children back. You want your husband or wife back. You want your job back. And we search for these things, and we try, and we think that if we get them, that our lives will be okay. But if I get all these outside things, but the inside remains the same, they'll just fall off. They won't mean anything to me. And so I was walking around in my life, and I had some stuff, but I wasn't happy. And this is really for the newcomers and people that are doing what I did. I would go to meetings, and I would put on this happy face, and I'd smile at you all, and I'd tell you how great everything was. And then I'd get home, and I was miserable. I hated life. I lied to you for years about how I really felt. I wasn't able to share with you what was going on with me. And you'll hear we're as sick as our secrets. And it was a lesson to be learned a little bit later on. I'll get to that. But I went through the first 2 years, and I hung around a group that said meeting makers make it. Commitments will keep you sober. Your sponsor will keep you sober. And that wasn't my experience. Meetings did not keep me sober. Commitments did not keep me sober. My sponsor did not keep me sober. They're so important for the new person, so important, right? But none of them kept me sober. And I drank after 2 years. And I was out for 2 years. And I came back I tried to hurt myself, and I got back into Alcoholics Anonymous, or I got into a rehab actually for 30 something days. And then I got back into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started to do it the same way. I went to tons of meetings. I got commitments. And these people that had told me about these things were well-intentioned people. They really were. But the alcoholic of my type, there's only one thing that can keep me sober. And when I say sober, I mean happy, joyous, and free without a drink. I don't mean just not drinking. Because if that's your idea when you get here at Alcoholics Anonymous, that you just want to quit drinking, you're missing the boat. You're missing what this thing is all about. I don't care if you have 35 years of sobriety or 30 years of sobriety. If I'm not doing the things that are directed in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I can be as new as the person with 1 day or 2 days. And I mean new in my mind, where alcoholism is centered. And so I would go through about 2 years of the same stuff, and I was back at that same place, that jumping off point where either I was going to drink or I needed to find a spiritual solution. And there's only two choices that they give us: die an alcoholic's death, or to find a spiritual life. And I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps. And I got to step 4, and I was in fear. And but one good thing happened. That 3-week-old baby that I was talking about, that ended up being my sister. We adopted her, the one my brother gave away. She calls me up one day, and it's funny how it happened during the 4-step, but she called me up one day and she said, "I'm looking for my father, your brother." And she wanted to find out something about him for her children. She had 3 beautiful children, and she wanted to know his medical background. And I got a call about a month later, and she said, "I found my father. I found your brother. And he was in the 17th year of a life sentence in prison." She said, "He wants to write you." And I said, "I don't care." I hated him. I didn't care what he did. I didn't care if I got a letter. I didn't care anything about it. And I was to get this letter about 3 weeks later. And in the letter, it said, "I was wrong not to be your big brother. And I was wrong to leave you with your father," and a few other wrongs. And I saw that, said, "That sounds really familiar." And my brother was making an amends to me. For 16 of the 17 years he had been in prison, he was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. They don't have H&I there. And so he was facilitating the meetings within the prison system. And I wrote him a nasty letter back because I was still in the blame game. And he wrote me back again, and he said, "I didn't do this for you. I did this for me. And I thank God that you were brought into my life, because today I feel freer than I've ever felt before." Here's a man that's locked behind bars, and he feels a freedom from that ninth step amends. And just think of all of us who are out here free, what that ninth step can do for you. My brother died just a little bit ago. "47 years in prison." He became the most spiritual man in my life. Alcoholics Anonymous is about mending relationships with family, with friends, with our jobs. I miss him. I miss him so much. So I went through the rest of the steps, got to page 104, the end of step 12, and I'm like, let life begin. I finally worked the steps. And I was to be pointed out a little bit later that on page 104, that doesn't say the end. And I just went on living life. I didn't work 10, 11, and 12. And Dr. Tebow, who is a psychiatrist that was used a lot in AA, a lot of his things, and he came up with these characteristics of the alcoholics. Were grandiose. If you read Bill's story, you'll see grandiosity it's riddled with grandiosity. How I'm going to be the leader of men. I'm going to lead companies. He joins the country club and he's going to become Walter Hagen, which at the time was the Tiger Woods of golf. And we have these things, and I just lost my train of thought, but I was to go 8 years before I drank again. And I was out there for 2 years, and I came back, and I was so sick that when I got back, I ended up 5150'd in the hospital. I spent 39 days in the hospital. I was so sick. And I got out of the hospital and I walked down the hill to the street where I go to get picked up to go home from the bus. And my first thought is there's a bar right down the block. After all I had been through, trying to kill myself, the sickness that I had, that was my first thought. We'll hear a lot in AA, this term, it's the first drink that gets you drunk. How many of you have heard that? That's not what it says. It says it's the thought that precedes the first drink that gets you drunk. Pouring whiskey into milk, and all the other crazy ideas that we get that alcohol is going to be the solution. But alcohol was never the solution. I hear that a lot. Alcohol gave me the illusion of a solution. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a deep, deep cut. And so I got back and I started on my journey this time around, and it's been 15 years. And so, I go back to those first 3 years, and it was the third year, and I was feeling crazy again. And I went into San Francisco. I had since moved up the peninsula. I went to San Francisco for a meeting, which I don't ever do. I hadn't gone to a meeting in San Francisco and I don't know how long. And I went to this meeting and there was this man speaking, and I'd never heard Alcoholics Anonymous the way this man was sharing it. And after the meeting, I walked up to him and I had said, I'm dying in Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you help me? And he said, it would be my honor to help you. And we went to his house and I told him my story, qualified myself as an alcoholic. And he would ask me the most important question that's ever been asked of me in Alcoholics Anonymous. He looked me straight in the eyes and he said, are you ready to stop working Murph's Anonymous? And it was like I got hit in the gut with a punch. And in that manner of seconds, I realized that I had never worked Alcoholics Anonymous as directed in the book. I had always worked Murph's Anonymous, picking and choosing the parts of the program that I was going to do, expecting the beautiful results that are offered in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we started working the steps, and I was finished. I was defeated. For the first time, I had a surrender that was complete, 100%. You have to buy into Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the first thing I have to do. That sponsor, that person I share with, I have to buy into this thing 100%. If any part of me thinks that I can do this a different way, I'm in trouble. It has to be an absolute surrender. I have to surrender every idea that I've ever had about Alcoholics Anonymous, every idea I've ever had about God. I have to surrender all the ideas that I think I know how to be happy. I think I know I have to have a better life. And what happened was I did that, and it opened the door just enough for God to come in. You got to the second step. And my sponsor looked at me and he goes, Murph, you can't sit on the couch watching Netflix expecting God to change your life for you, right? God gives me the strength to do it myself. And I found out, I thought I had a problem with God when I got here, but I didn't have a problem with God. I never had a God. I had a problem with your God, with Danny's God, with Laura's God, with Andy's God. I had a problem with the God that I had been brought up with in religion, but I had never had my own relationship with God, a God of my understanding. And my sponsor had me take a sheet of paper and he had me write everything that God would be if God existed for me. Love was on it. Having things in abundance was on it. A protector for me was on it. And there were like 5 things on there. And that was the beginning of my God. And he said, Murph, now it's time for you to start seeking and searching out something that's comfortable for you, something that you can learn to trust and have faith in. And to search all over, to use all the books that I want to read, YouTube for spiritual talks, and start incorporating that into my God. And on page 53, it was placed perfectly there. I mean, it's the perfect spot for something. On 52 are the bedevilments, and I think most people know what the bedevilments are. Correct? Is that a yes? And I'll read off the bedevilments to you. There we go. Sorry about that. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That's how I am, drunk or sober. And on page 53, there's the question that's asked. Either God is everything or God is nothing. What is my choice to be? If God is nothing, then I will continue to live my life in those bedevilments. If God is everything, then I no longer have to choose anymore. I no longer have to try to figure out the results of anything anymore, which is our problem. Fear is an illusion. Fear is me trying to figure out or trying to come up with a solution to something, right? Future events already ruined is my favorite acronym for fear. But fear is nothing but a lie. The only true fear happens when there's like a knife to your throat. That's fear. The rest of the fear we have is made up. And we began to start looking at the thought that preceded the fear. The character defects that we believe we have, like procrastination, anger, and different things like that are the outward expression of a wrong thought or a wrong perception. They're not the problem. That's why we don't work on them, because I don't know what is good for me and I don't know what is bad for me. I don't know what a character defect is, and I don't know what a character asset is. Things I think are assets become defects. Things I think are defects become assets, right? So when I was procrastinating on going to school, this is a 7-step thing. When I was procrastinating on going to school for years, I was 50 years old at the time, and I wanted to go back to school, and I'd been wanting to go to school for 4 years. When my sponsor came up to me one day and said, "Murph, what's going on with you? You're not the same happy, joyous guy." And I said, "Well, I keep procrastinating on going to school." And he goes, "You think procrastination is your problem?" I said, "Well, yes." And he goes, "What are you afraid of?" And I went, "Huh?" He goes, "What are you afraid of?" And we sat down and I went over my fears with him. I was afraid I couldn't make the grade. And he said, "You've never been in a college class, you've never opened a college book, and you know you can't make the grade?" That was a lie I was telling myself. The fear was a lie. And the only thing that can conquer fear is the truth. The greatest one was, "I can't afford to go to school." And he goes, "How much does it cost?" And I said, "I don't know." So I had convinced myself I couldn't afford to go to school, and I didn't even know how much it cost. But the problem with alcoholics is that we believe the lies that we tell ourselves. And if you believe the lie, it'll affect your life as if it's the truth. I didn't think I was good enough to go to school. But when I got through all of those lies that I told myself, all of those fears, and I was sitting there with my sponsor, and an intuitive thought came into my head. "Why don't you call Rob?" And so I called my buddy Rob, who went to school at 49. And in 2 days, I was enrolled in college, where I had a 3.9 grade point average. All of those things that I had told myself were lies. And once I got through them, once I got to the truth, the thing that conquers fear is the truth, I was able to walk into that class. Procrastination wasn't my problem. It was what I was afraid of. It's that 4th column in the 4th step, which is one of the most important things in the book, because that 4th column takes me through step 5, step 6, step 7, step 8, step 9. Right? And I got to that 4th column with my father. And this time, with that full surrender, having God come into my life, and then turning my will and my life, my thinking, my actions over to the care of this power, I went into that 4th step unafraid. And I started asking questions about my father. It wasn't about what my father had done to me. It was about why my father was like he was. And I started to get answers from uncles and from family members. And I found out that in World War II, my father's job was to go into the prisoner of war camps and get the Jewish prisoners out. And what he saw damaged him. And when he came home, my uncle told me he was never the same man. He was at a picnic with his first wife. She got stung by a bee in the throat. It swelled in, and she suffocated and died right in front of him at this picnic. My brother was there. He lost the bar to bankruptcy, and we lost our home, and he was an alcoholic. And for the first time in my life, I had empathy for a man that I hated with every fiber in me for my entire life. I had the wrong perception of my father. And when I found out his true story, I was able to heal. It didn't make what he did to me right, but I understood it now. And for the first time in my life, I was free of anger and free of resentment. And I went through the rest of the steps. I began to make my amends. I made all my amends. And when you make your amends, and when you begin that, when you start that amends, that's when I start steps 10 and 11. I get a daily reprieve contingent upon my spiritual condition. You don't relapse because you stop going to meetings. You don't relapse because somebody dies in your family. You don't relapse because you lose a job. I relapse because I fail to grow spiritually. When I do that, then I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to sponsor people. I don't want to do these things. But if I stay fresh, every morning I wake up to the vultures and they're sitting there on the bedposts and they're waiting for me to open my eyes. And right when the eyes open, hey, Murph, let's talk about how unappreciated you are at work. Let's talk about how the girl disrespects you. And before I can get my foot off the bed, I'm already into my thinking. So I have to surrender every morning and ask God in. And I do that. And I'll end it with this. At night, every night, I look back at my day. I look, where was I afraid? What were the thoughts that were behind that fear? I look at where I was selfish, where I was self-centered, where I was dishonest. You can't stay clean on yesterday's shower. Everything that I do in the day that I'm in begins the same way and ends the same way. I never go to bed with the thoughts of yesterday in my mind. The 11th step is the greatest sleeping pill there is on the planet. And what I get now is the most incredible life you can ever imagine. I love Murph. I love my life. I love everything about it. And it's all due to Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps, and the spiritual awakening, which is the only message in Alcoholics Anonymous, a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I hope that just one of you got a little bit out of my share. Thank you.